Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. This week was one of the most interesting overall weekends of football for somebody who covers the Browns I've had in quite some time, because there were a couple of things that happened over the weekend that have combined to put Browns fans and probably the Browns organization themselves into a position where we're going to have that conversation. Now, if you don't know what I mean by that conversation, we are talking about the break glass in case of emergency, the hey, if this happens, you need to do this scenario, the way to solve one of your biggest problems you've had lingering in your franchise's history. We are going to have that conversation, right? Even whenever I talk about how much I hate tanking and how much I think tanking sucks, I've always left one exception. And the one exception is, hey, if you think there's a quarterback you're going to want, do what you need to do. All right, so the way this class is broken down, right, there's been three names that keep popping up at the top of the first round conversation. There's Fernando Mendoza, there's Dante Moore, and there's Ty Simpson. Now, what's made this more shaky than most, right, isn't necessarily the talent of those three players. I think a lot of scouts would tell you that those three guys you would be happy to take in the top 10, given what you've seen from them so far. The question is, are these guys going to come out or not? Now, Mendoza seems more of a lock to come out than the rest, but Ty Simpson, will he come out? Will he not? He does have a year of eligibility left. The same thing with Dante Moore, right? So there's questions about their eligibility and will they use their eligibility or will they come out? Odds are, if somebody is rumored to be a top 10 pick, 9 times out of 10, that guy's coming out. There are rare scenarios where a guy decides to stay. Maybe they think they can win a national championship. Maybe they come just this close to coming to a national championship, but they don't get it. So they go back to college, try to get it, right? Maybe that goes down. And then one of these guys stays in there. But the three guys that we've been focusing on at the top of the first round here all had very interesting games on Saturday, right? You had Mendoza going up against a very talented Penn State defense on the road. You had Dante Moore going up against a very good Iowa defense on the road. And then you had Ty Simpson at home, but playing LSU, which is always difficult when you're at Alabama. So Saturday was a day for evaluating the quarterbacks. And the one thing that we know that this class, if those three guys come out, they can do is produce, right? They have great numbers this year. They've made great numbers. I think the big question is you want to know, how do they respond in gotta-have-it situations? Well, 2 of these games ended in gotta-have-it situations. Indiana versus Penn State. Now, Penn State punched Indiana in the mouth more than they've ever been punched this season. The most human Indiana has looked. Also, during the game, Indiana's dropping offensive lineman after offensive lineman. I think in the broadcast, they said they were down to like the third guard, a backup tackle, and Penn State's defensive line is just dominating Indiana's offensive line in a way that we haven't seen before. And we're getting to get a look at how Fernando Mendoza responds to not just pressure, as in like defensive linemen creating literal pressure, but also pressure as in, hey, if you lose this game, the season might be over, right? As far as you winning the Big Ten championship, it might be over with. So high pressure situation, a lot of pressure in his face, a lot of pressure to win the game. And in the final drive of the game, Mendoza right down the field goes zoop, 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 zoop. I think in 5 plays, scores a touchdown. Now, he was aided by an incredible catch by Omar Cooper. But again, I talk about this all the time. Sometimes the quarterback's job is to throw the most perfect ball you've ever seen. Sometimes the quarterback's job is also give your wide receiver a chance to make a play. And at the end of the game, in the red zone, you just want to give a guy a chance. And he gave Omar Cooper a chance, and Omar Cooper made one of the greatest catches you've ever seen. Great drive, great win. That's his second game-winning drive of the season. A lot of people making arguments about the Heisman. I don't really care about the Heisman, but that's the kind of stuff you want to see from a guy you expect to go number one overall. Right? Like if you're saying this quarterback could go number one overall, that's what you want to see. That's the kind of stuff that I always knocked Cam Ward for not being able to do and why I did not think he was a first round pick. Now I was one of the few that was willing to say that, but we'll see how that stands in a couple of years. Maybe it's one of my worst takes, but right now it looks pretty good. But that was the stuff that Cam Ward didn't do. Right. And even to a point, right, Shador, who I thought would be better than Cam Ward, my big issue with Shador was there were no big wins for him. He didn't have a single big win in college, which I think is a problem when we're talking about a first-round pick as a quarterback. Like, I think you need a signature win. But that's just my opinion there. You get that from Mendoza. You turn on the Iowa game, and a similar thing happens in the Iowa game where Dante Moore's back's against the wall. Now, the fun thing about this one was that Dante Moore was put in this situation when he played Indiana earlier this season. And Mendoza responded, but Dante Moore, he threw an interception. So there was a question about, hey, how does this guy respond in that kind of a moment? Now, Dante Moore's the one that's most questionable to come out. A lot of people seem to believe he won't come out this year, but I think if he's going to be a top 10 projected pick, he might just have to come out this year. But anyways, nonetheless, he's put back against the wall on the road, hectic environment in Iowa. They think they might get a top 10 dub. He throws and responds with one of the most beautiful passes you'll ever see to get the Ducks in field goal range and to win them that football game. Ty Simpson was very impressive. He didn't have a game-winning drive, but he was very impressive in his game versus LSU. Some throws that he's capable of making that are very impressive. And to Ty Simpson's credit, he had already had a couple game-winning drives under his belt. I think one against Missouri and another one against South Carolina, where he was put in an identical situation as Mendoza and Dante Moore. And you're looking at this quarterback class and you're saying, okay, there's three guys here that if they all come out, they pass the sniff test. Like you want to see when you're talking about taking a quarterback, you want to see guys do stuff in their college career, like win meaningful games, like show up in the biggest moments of games, and you'll want to see them play big-time, meaningful football and elevate their team, right? You could say Mendoza certainly has Indiana at a much better place than they were last year with Curtis Wark, we had Curtis Wark. You could say that Dante Moore has Oregon looking like more of a threat than they did with Dylan Gabriel. And you can say that Alabama looks like more of a threat than they did with Jalen Milroe last year. So you can argue that all three of these guys have elevated the current team you're on. Now, look, I know whenever you bring up quarterback, right, people want to bring up, well, what about the offensive line? And what about wide receiver? And what about all of these other problems? And look, problems are going to exist no matter where your team is, no matter how good your team is. Look at the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles right now. They got problems on those rosters up and down. They're also the two teams that were in the Super Bowl last year and the two teams that have dominated the Super Bowl conversation for like half a decade here. So, yeah, you're going to have problems. No doubt about it. And you're going to have to address those problems, right? If the Browns want to draft a quarterback with their top pick, they're going to have to do something about the offensive line and free agency and with the rest of the draft picks. And they're also going to have to address wide receiver in the draft and in free agency. Like, you're not just going to not do something just because you take a quarterback. If for whatever reason, whenever anybody brings up that you might want to draft the quarterback, the first thing that people do, because internally, I don't think they're afraid of drafting a quarterback, right? But, you got to go ahead and do it. And if you got to solve some problems afterwards, so be it, right? The Bengals did not have Jamar Chase when they got Joe Burrow. They got Jamar Chase after they got Joe Burrow. You know what I mean? Like, you can solve these problems as you go on. You can solve these problems in the same draft class. Some guys can emerge on your roster currently that can help you solve these problems. It's not that it's not going to stop you from taking a quarterback. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the opportunity to take a guy in the top 5 who is seemingly valued in the top 5 is just so rare, you cannot pass it up. And the Browns look like they're going to be in that situation. Doesn't mean you don't address anything else, but you certainly can't pass that up. Because, boy, how stupid are you going to feel in a couple of years if you decide we're going to fix this and that, and then we'll come back at quarterback, and then your comeback at quarterback ends up being like Mac Jones, and you're starting Mac Jones with the best roster you ever seen the Browns have. We've literally lived that story before here in Cleveland, right? 2023, where we didn't have a quarterback, but boy, did we have the roster. And we were all saying, man, if we had a quarterback, we'd be great. I'm not trying to be in a man, if we had a quarterback, we'd be great situation. I want to get the quarterback and then we can figure out how to fix everything else. That's me personally. But yeah, I get those concerns, but I feel like that's more or less a manifestation of people's anxiety about drafting a quarterback and not really a good reason not to do it. You feel me? That's what happened on Saturday, right? So you leave Saturday thinking, oh, man, there might be quarterbacks in this class, right? I'm starting to see people who have been, no, there's no quarterbacks. This class sucks. Start to come around on the idea that there's quarterbacks on this class. People who weren't really familiar with Mendoza and thought that he was just some name I was making up earlier in the season, all of a sudden, getting really excited about Fernando Mendoza. Like that game, that comeback victory versus Penn State made him a national star. You know, like people are talking about this as his Heisman moment. I'm hearing people I've never heard talk about Fernando Mendoza. You know, like that game. And look, college football and college football awards are about moments. Same as the MVP, right? Lamar Jackson was the MVP last year, or should have been the MVP last year, but they gave it to Josh Allen because he had more fun moments. And that's just how these awards are made, or how these awards are rewarded. And Mendoza, you know, he has that one moment where you could point to and say, that's a Heisman moment. Where somebody like Sand is literally beating the shit out of every team that he plays so badly that there's no like opportunity for Heisman moments, but has better numbers. So it's like, it's tough for the Heisman. That's why I don't care who wins the Heisman this year. But if we're talking about this quarterback class 2026 and what we saw from this weekend from those guys, you look around and you say to yourself, oh shit, hey, if these guys come out, if just 2 of these guys come out, you know, you're going to want one of them. You know what I mean? If it's just Mendoza and Simpson, man, you got to go take that. You got to go take that chance. And look, I'm hearing people I trust, people I bring on the show, tell me things like, hey, this class, like if Mendoza and Simpson are way better than any quarterback in the last draft class by a margin, you know, we're hearing people I trust. I brought on this show, Derek Bell, JP, saying, hey, look, this looks like top 5, top 10 pick stuff here at quarterback. So that was already one of the red alerts for having that conversation. And then real quick, before we go into what happened on Sunday, let's talk about our sponsor for today, Sleeper. The good news for today is that if you did piggyback onto my picks, you might have made some moolah, especially if you did it on my sponsor for today, Sleeper. Let's look at our pick. I had a feeling that Jerry Jeudy was going to have a bounce back this week with the change of play caller. One of the things I liked about this game was the focus on Jerry Jeudy. 78 yards. It's over the 37.5 they had for him. 6 receptions. It's over the 3.5 that they had for him. Dylan Gabriel's rushing yards, I thought he would have a lot because there would be a lot of rushing lanes this week. 7.5 rushing yards is what they had. I said he would get more than that. Garrett Wilson, they thought his longest reception would be over 21 yards. I thought the Browns would do a good job containing him. And all of those picks were correct. And I did win $34. If you want to join the fun, make sure you use the promo code WORSTTAKE. Get a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code WORSTTAKE. And we get to Sunday. Last afternoon. The Browns lost to the Jets. Now, this does 2 things. One, it jumps the Browns' odds to get a top 5 pick, I think from like 77 to like 90. The Browns are basically a virtual lock to get a top 5 pick. And if we look at the rest of their schedule, you can see why that would be the case, right? And when I read out the schedule, I need people to understand the Browns haven't won a road game since week 2 of 2024. So when people are going to be like, oh, that's a winnable game, if it's on the road, it's probably not a winnable game. I mean, hell, we just lost to the Jets on the road. Next week, the Browns play the Baltimore Ravens. I think we can all agree it's not going to be a dub. The Las Vegas Raiders in Las Vegas, Browns haven't won that game in a long time, and it's a road game. It's probably not going to be great for them. Then you go and you play the San Francisco 49ers at home. You play the Tennessee Titans at home. So you're probably thinking you're going to beat the Titans, right? Like I would think Tennessee Titans at home. I think you can count that one as a win. The 49ers are an interesting one because Jim Schwartz tends to work some voodoo magic against the 49ers. But the 49ers should beat you. Then you go at Chicago. It's a 50-50 game, kind of. But Chicago's a much better team than you this year, record-wise. Buffalo Bills at home. I mean, I know the Dolphins beat them, but I don't think they're going to get got twice. Then you play Pittsburgh at home, which is always a winnable game, right? It's in division. In division is weird, but, you know, you haven't lost to Pittsburgh at home in a long time. Cincinnati at Cincinnati. Carolina. No, that's the preseason. But Cincinnati at Cincinnati to end the season. But the elephant in the room is, let's say the Browns get to December and they lose to the Ravens, so they're 2-8. They lose to the Raiders and they're 2-9. And they lose to the 49ers and they're 2-10. If the Cleveland Browns are 2-10 by December, they are going to start to make decisions just like they did last year where they put Bailey Zapp in and bench Jameis Winston. They're going to start to make decisions around week 14 to prioritize their draft position. If they get to 2-10, they're gonna do the thing, right? And it looks like they're gonna get to 2-10, especially after losing to the Jets. So yeah, the Titans feel like a winnable game, but who knows what the Browns are gonna throw out there for that game that week because they're 2-10 at that point. They're probably not trying to put the roster in a place to where they're gonna obviously win that game. The same's going to be said with the Bears, the Buffalo Bills game, the Steelers, and the Bengals game, right? They have the tiebreaker when it comes to win percentage. Win percentage, opponent win percentage, or strength of schedule. So they're going to take advantage of that. If it's December and they're a 10-loss team, they're going to do what they need to do there. They did the same thing last year to secure the number 2 overall pick. And that means we got to start having that conversation. And look, I know a lot of fans hate this conversation because it's basically talking about losing on purpose, and it feels disgusting and ugly. But the Browns have a problem to solve, and the only way to really solve that problem is through the draft. And you know, there's quarterbacks in this class, but we don't know how many quarterbacks there's going to be in this class. You know, there could be 4 guys you feel good about. There could be just 2 guys or 1 guy that you feel good about. And you're the Browns, you want to get whatever guys are in there that you feel good about. And you got to put yourself in that position because I don't see very many opportunities left for this football team to go out and try to find a quarterback. You can try to kick the can down the road to 2027, but the reality is if you're bad enough to take a quarterback in 2027, everybody's going to be fired. So you're basically starting over, and who knows that the guy who's starting over is going to want to start over automatically with the quarterback if you like, and who knows what that guy's preferences is going to be at quarterback. If you want to get the guy, you got to go ahead and do it this year, basically, if you're the Cleveland Browns. And that means the rest of this season is very likely going to be extremely uncomfortable. Get ready for it. I'm telling you right now, it's going to be uncomfortable. And look, I talk to my guy Ace Boogie all the time about this because he lived through this recently because there was a point in the season, he said around like November, where he realized he wanted Joe Burrow in the draft more than he wanted anything else. And it was awkward. It's a lot of infighting, a lot of people mad at you. Why don't we just stick with whatever guys on the roster, right? There were people in Cincinnati that would have rather just drafted a wide receiver and stuck with Andy Dalton. The same way people are like, we should just stick with insert quarterback's name and draft some pieces around him. There's always going to be that. But at the end of the day, he's happy that they lost because they got Joe Burrow. I'm not saying any of these guys in this class are Joe Burrow. We don't know that yet. But what I am saying is that there are 3 guys that could come out this year that you could justify spending a top 5 pick on. And that's not common. It's not common that you have a top 5 pick, and it's not common that when you have a top 5 pick, there's a quarterback available that's worth a top 5 pick. If those 2 things line up for the Cleveland Browns, they have to do it. I don't care what else is going on with the team. They have to do it. Passing up on those kind of situations are exactly why the Browns have been looking for a quarterback the last 20 years. So it's time for that conversation. I know some people might be dreading it, don't want to have it, but it's time for that conversation. And that conversation has to start to be about next year. I think this next offseason, and look, we've heard it before. Browns fans have heard next season all the time. But I'm saying right now, 2026 is going to be the make or break offseason for this franchise, for the Andrew Berry era, for everything, right? This is their one chance to rebound from the mistake of the Deshaun Watson trade and enter into a new era that could possibly be exactly what Browns fans have wanted. This is their shot this offseason. They got to maximize their shot, and that might mean shit's going to have to get uncomfortable for the next couple of months. That just might be what it's going to have to be, right? It's already uncomfortable right now. It might get a little bit more uncomfortable, but it might be what's necessary to find comfort in the future. This is a difficult conversation. I wish that we had no need. We had our quarterback. We had no need to have conversations like this, but this is where they're at, right? They are a bad football team right now. They already are at a point to where it's going to be almost impossible for them to go over 500. They're not going to be a playoff team. They're probably going to be one of the first few teams eliminated from the playoffs. And that's probably going to happen in December. And when that happens, well, as Andrew Berry says, it's probably going to be time for a strategic pivot. Let me know what y'all think in the comment section down below. Do you think 2026 is the opportunity that the Browns could use to finally get this thing where we've wanted it to be for the last 5 years? Or do you think that this offseason isn't that opportunity? Let me know in the comment section below. You have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.